If you're raising Coturnix quail chicks for the first time, congratulations, but there are a few things that you need to know. Coturnix quail, when they're first born, are tiny and fragile, and there are a few beginner mistakes that can wipe out your entire hatch before you even get started. I made a few of those mistakes myself when I first started raising these quail, and I don't want it to happen to you. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to set up a safe and simple and affordable brooder for Coturnix quail that will help your chicks thrive. And I'll point out the most common mistakes that cause baby quail to die. Make sure to give this video a like, and if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps out my channel a lot. Let's get into it. If you're raising Coturnix quail, here's exactly what you'll need. I also linked everything down below in the description. They are my affiliate Amazon links. These are the things that I use here at home. First of all, you're going to need a large plastic tote or a brooder box with tall sides. Quail chicks are very, very tiny, but they can jump surprisingly high in just a couple weeks. So you want to make sure that you have a container that will accommodate their ability to jump high. You're also going to want to use paper towels for the first 3 days or so. Paper towels really help the quail gain traction. You don't want to use newspapers. Newspapers or slick surfaces can cause a condition called splay leg, where their legs slide out from underneath them and they'll never be able to stand or walk properly after that. It can be fixed, but it's very hard to fix. Otherwise, it's kind of a death sentence. Next up, you're going to want some pine shavings. So after about 4 days or so, you want to switch from paper towels to pine shavings. A big tip here, don't ever use cedar. It's very toxic to birds. I guess aspen's okay, but I think pine shavings are the best way to go. You'll also need some kind of safe heat source. I highly recommend a brooder heater over a heat lamp. Heat lamps are a huge fire hazard, so not only could they cause a fire if they fall down, they've also been known to overheat and explode. This could happen from just the oil on your hands getting onto the bulb or a little bit of moisture, but either way, it could cause the bulb to explode and burn everything down. It happens every single year to a lot of people. There are safer ways, so I recommend a brooder heater plate. You can get these relatively cheaply on Amazon or from your local farm store. You'll also want a chick water. You want to make sure that you put marbles or small pebbles in the place where they go and drink, because they are so small that they have been known to die inside of the water. So you want to make sure for at least the first week or so you're putting marbles or some kind of gravel into the little container that they can drink out of to make sure that they don't drown. You're going to want a high protein starter feed. I recommend at least 28 to 30% protein just while they're young. Quail at this age need way more protein than chickens, and we'll go ahead and talk about feeding in just a second. On that note, you're also going to want some kind of kitchen blender or coffee grinder or herb grinder. The reason that you need a grinder is because you'll want to grind that starter feed into a powder for the first week or so. One common mistake that people make is they don't grind the food down, and the quail, it's so big that the quail can't actually eat it, and they just starve to death. And people oftentimes will notice that a bunch of their quail chicks will die at once, and they'll think maybe it's like avian flu or something more serious, but in reality, they just couldn't eat the pebbles of food. So make sure you want to grind those down. Next, you're going to want a thermometer. You need to know your brooder temperature. You don't want to guess on this. And then lastly, you're going to need some kind of screen or mesh lid. Once they're about 2 weeks old, they have the ability to fly and to jump straight up. And you don't want to find the quail getting trapped outside of their brooders, because this is almost like certain death. So if they don't get stepped on or eaten by one of your pets, they will just be separated from their heat source and they could just freeze to death. So make sure you get some kind of lid on top of your brooder setup. All right, so setting up your brooder. The first thing that you're going to want to do with your brooder box is go ahead and put down the paper towels if they are day-old chicks. So I hatch my own quail. So the first 3 days or so, I will line the whole bottom with paper towels, and you want to line it with enough layers so that the liquids don't soak into the paper towels. On one side of the brooder, you want to put your brooder heater. This is going to be the warm side, and you need to adjust it so it just barely touches the backs of the chicks when they stand up. Most brooder heaters have like 3 or 4 different settings, so you probably want to set it on the lowest setting height-wise for the quail, because they're quite small. On the opposite side of the brooder heater, you're going to want to leave some room for the food and for the water. And then this will go ahead and give them a warm zone and a cool zone so they can cool off and they get used to regulating their body temperatures. After you have the brooder heater all set up, you want to go ahead and fill up your water. Don't forget to add marbles or some kind of pebbles, and go ahead and place that water dish onto the cool side. I'll go ahead and link the water dish that I used down below just so you can have an idea of what to shop for. The biggest thing that you want to look out for, though, whenever you go buy your water is you want to make sure that the lip isn't too deep And if in doubt, just go ahead and add more marbles. The marbles will create they'll create a little bit of a space so that the chicks can still get the water. You just don't want them to drown. It's not a fun experience to walk out and find a bunch of dead chicks. That's happened to me. It was a dumb mistake, and I could have prevented that if I'd just done a little bit of research ahead of time. Now let's talk about feed. So quail chicks, at least in their first week or so, can't eat standard crumble. The pieces are just way too big. Starting off with the type of feed that you're going to want a game bird starter, something with 28 to 30% protein or so, and you want to make sure that you grind it into a powder. So you can use an electric coffee grinder, you can use any type of blender that you have laying around in your kitchen, or you can use an herb grinder. I'll link some below. I personally like the coffee grinder, but the herb grinders are probably like the second best option. But anything that will take that crumble and turn it into a powder. You want to make sure that you put your ground up food into a shallow feeder so that the chicks can access it. Just double check and make sure that they can actually reach the feeder. Some feeders are offset and they sit really high, just above where the chicks can reach, at least for the first few days. So just make sure that it's at a height where they can actually access the food. Then you're going to go ahead and add your thermometer. You want to put this in your brooder near the heat source. Your goal for the first week is 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and you want to decrease this by about 5 degrees Fahrenheit per week until the temperature aligns with whatever temperature it is outside or wherever it is that you're going to store the quail. So you want to slowly take their temperature down every week about 5 degrees just to make sure that they don't go into shock. You don't want to take them at 90 degrees and then throw them outside into like 55 degree weather. They might go into shock. So you just want to try to avoid that. Now here's where things go wrong for a lot of people, and these are the biggest mistakes that I see and that I've even learned myself. So some of these are just the mistakes I've learned myself and that I've also seen other people make, and I think we can all learn something from these mistakes. So mistake number one I see are unsafe water dishes. This is a mistake that I talk about because I made this myself. I was using water that I would use for quail or chicks, but I wasn't putting anything inside of it, and the lip was too big. This one was designed for chickens, so the lip was too big, and I lost a couple quail due to drowning. Make sure you don't make that mistake. The second mistake that I see, and this really could be tied with number one, is not grinding the feed. Starvation is a real issue. Baby quail just can't handle those large crumbles that they sell to you in the stores. As far as I know, nobody really offers quail feed that's ground down into a powder, so you most likely will have to do it yourself. Mistake number three that I see people make is not having a warm zone and a cool zone. So if quail can't move away from their heat, if you have them directly under a heat lamp, they can overheat and actually die. And on the opposite side of that, if they do not have a warm zone, so if it's too cool, they're going to go and pile on top of each other, and the ones in the middle of the pile can get crushed to death and they can die. So they can die from being crushed, but they can also die from not having the right body temperature. So you want to make sure you have a warm zone and a cool zone, and you want to make sure you're checking the thermometer on a regular basis. Mistake number four that I see is not providing a 24-hour light of some kind for the first few days or so. Quail chicks need to be able to find their food and water, and if you turn off the lights, they won't be able to find their food and water because they have to eat fairly regularly. And also, if you turn off the lights, they might wander out of your brooder heater. So this is especially true if you're using a brooder heater and not a heat lamp. If you're using a heat lamp, that emits its own light. But if you're using a brooder heater, there's no light at all. So what the quail will do when they're new is they will walk from under their brooder heater and they will venture over to the cool side, and they will get lost and not be able to find their way back, and thus they will die from freezing to death. So make sure just leave some kind of light source on for the first 2 or 3 days or so until the quail can get used to their environment. And again, this is something that I learned myself through mistakes. Take my lessons and apply them to your own practice. And mistake number 5 that I see is using newspaper or some kind of slick surfaces. Remember, newspapers will cause splay leg, which causes their legs, they're supposed to go like this. It will cause them to go like that, and they will never be able to walk right, which affects everything. So they won't be able to sit in a standard quail enclosure. They won't be able to stand up to access their feed, and they won't be able to stand up to access their water, and they can't do much moving whatsoever. Splay leg is fixable. However, it's just easier to avoid it altogether. Go ahead and use paper towels for the first 3 or 4 days, and then switch over to pine shavings or something similar like that. Just do not use newspaper or any types of paper. All right, let's talk about feeding for a minute. The first 5 or 6 weeks or so of the quail's life, you want to start them on a 28 to 30% game bird starter. They need all this protein to develop properly, which is significantly more than what chickens need. Once they start laying eggs, you can start to take them off of that high protein starter, and you can actually go ahead and use a chicken layer crumble, 18 to 20% protein. So this Just to give you an example, when I go to get my game bird starter, that really high 28 to 30% protein, it usually runs me about $30. When I buy feed for my laying hens, for the same amount of food, 50 pounds, it's going to cost me about $15. So don't spend the extra money on the game bird starter. They need lower protein once they start laying eggs anyway, so it's best just to use the chicken layer crumble. There's two major reasons why you want to go ahead and take those quail from the high protein starter down to a low protein crumble. The two reasons are that they could prolapse and they could become egg bound, so you won't get your eggs. They can actually go and get injured from those eggs getting stuck inside of them, or they can prolapse. I'm not going to get into details with that here, but go ahead and do an incognito Google search of that. And look at the pictures. It's not pretty, and you don't want to go there. And don't forget to add fresh pine shavings multiple times a day. This will keep your brooder clean and prevent diseases, and most importantly, probably, it will prevent ammonia buildup. Consider using poultry safe lime. You want to sprinkle a little bit of that on the base and then go ahead and add pine shavings over it. This will also help absorb some of that ammonia odor, and it will keep them smelling fresh. And you can do this from when they're chicks all the way through adulthood. So when can you move the quail outside? Well, it kind of depends on where you live. So generally between 3 and 5 weeks, depending on your climate, you should be able to move them outside. Generally, if they're fully feathered by 3 weeks or so, you can move them outside as long as it's warm in your area. In cooler climates, you want to wait till they're closer to 5 weeks. And if the climate's really cold, maybe wait till 6 weeks. But usually after week 5, you're safe in all types of climates. So if in doubt, I guess a good rule of thumb is just to err on the side of caution and keep your chicks inside the brooder a little bit longer. It's always better to be safe than sorry. So there you have it. That's a safe, simple setup for raising Coturnix quail, and it's pretty cheap. I did link all those products that I talked about in my YouTube description. I hope this video helped you avoid making some very common Coturnix quail mistakes. Raising these quail is incredibly rewarding, but for the first few weeks, it can be super tricky and super stressful. It doesn't really have to be. Make sure to follow these tips, and you should have strong, healthy birds. Now, of course, quail are one of those birds that are known to, make themselves not alive. And this just happens more so than it does with chicks. So no matter what, there is a good chance that you might lose a few birds. But if you follow these tips, hopefully your loss is much less than my first few rounds of it were. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit that like button. And if you are new here, please make sure to subscribe. It's a free way where you can help my channel out. It really helps a lot. And if you're raising quail for the first time, drop a comment down below and let me know. I'd love to hear how your hatch is going and what kind of quail that you're raising. I just hatched some blue celadon quail. I'm going to make a video about those next week, and I'm looking for possibly some bob white or California quail to hatch next time. Thank you guys for watching my video. I really appreciate it, and until next time, stay cool.